6. Chapter 6. Wind up the maple tree or wind up the maple tree. We'll find out. On Thursday afternoon, the weather changed and a raw, cold wind. Turn off that TV. On Thursday afternoon, the weather changed and a raw, cold wind blew from the northwest. The thawing day grew bitter. And by the time Toby and Betsy went to the livery stable for Windyfoot, it was freezing. "Oh, darn, this means the end of the first sap run," Toby said. "Won't it run anymore?" Betsy asked anxiously. "Sure, 3 or 4 more times, probably, but not until it thaws again." "Have we got enough syrup for the party?" "Gosh, yes," he laughed. "How are your star cakes coming?" "They're all done, but I haven't wrapped them yet. I'll mail Tish's box tomorrow. Is there any green tissue paper at home?" "I don't know for sure," he answered, "but it seems to me Mom had some left over for Christmas." "Why?" "I want to wrap Miss Tony's box in it, and I'm going to give a star to each of my guests, and I want to wrap them too, green, for St. Patrick's Day," she said as if he didn't know. "I'll wrap mine in white paper and tie it with green ribbon if I can find any." When they reached home, Betsy carried his books and her own into the house while he unharnessed Windy from the red sleigh and led him to the stable. He curried the pony and brushed his black mane and tail. "You've got to look handsome for the party tomorrow, Windy," he said. "If Betsy's going to take Chris in the house and show him off, I'm certainly going to take you in for a minute too, if Mom will let me." Windy rubbed his nose against Toby's shoulder and suddenly reached out and nipped his cap off. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" Windy dropped the cap into his manger and whooshed. "Fresh," laughed Toby, giving the pony's neck a hug. The warm, lighted kitchen smelled deliciously of freshly made donuts. Toby sniffed hungrily. Mom was in the pantry, cutting out more donuts, and there were 3 pans of them, crisp and brown, on the largest shelf. "Wow," said Toby rapturously, reaching for one. "Hello, Mom." "Hello, my endless appetite," smiled Mom. "Don't eat too many and spoil your supper. Dad says, you won't have to go up to the bush this afternoon. He and Cliff are finishing up this run and they won't work tonight. You're to start the milking and they'll send Blinkers Bolton down to help you." "Okay, Mom, look at. We got any green and white tissue paper?" "Yes, in the hall closet upstairs in the Christmas box. There's ribbon, too, if you need any. Green? Green cellophane and red and white." "That's just what I need. I'll go get it. Hey, Bets, come on upstairs. Mom says there's paper and ribbon." Johnny came racing into the kitchen from the dining room, accompanied by Ribs, the collie, who was prancing around the little boy. Ribs got so tangled with Johnny's feet that Johnny stumbled and fell on the dog. They both yelped. Johnny arose with dignity and shook a finger at Ribs. "Either walk like a dog or don't walk at all," he said sternly. "Hello, Toby. What are you doing?" "We're up to wrap our sugar cakes for tomorrow night." "Can I help, huh?" "May you help," corrected Betsy. "My goodness, your grammar." "Hammer grammar," said Johnny saucily. "All right, then. May I?" "You bet your button," said Toby, rumpling his hair. "Come on, race you to the stairs." It stormed during the night, and by Friday morning, there were drifts of fresh white snow for the sugaring off. After school, Betsy and Toby helped Mom with the final arrangements for the party. They spread the large green and white check tablecloth on the long dining room table toward each end, and at each side, Betsy placed big yellow and blue and green and lilac mixing bowls piled high with donuts. Then she arranged 4 neat stacks of green paper napkins. Mom brought birch log candlestick that Toby had made her for Christmas, with the 3 green candles in it, and set it in the center of the table. "This is the nicest candlestick I ever had," she said. "Don't forget the dishes of pickles, Bets. You need them after all that sweetness. I'd better go start the cocoa kettle." Toby scalded the pans for the new snow and carried them out to the backyard. Johnny, in his red snowsuit, tagged after him to the crabapple tree, carrying his small, scoured snow shovel. "It's getting dark, Johnny. Will you be able to see all right by the light from the pantry windows?" "I can see like a pussycat," Johnny stated, starting to dig ferociously and fill the pans with clean whiteness. "Pack it down hard and set the pans near the woodshed when they're finished. I better get you a lantern." "I can see in the dark like poke." Johnny tossed a shovelful of snow at Toby, who dodged. "Why don't you hold still so I can sprinkle you with a snowstorm?" "Haven't time," Toby told him, hurrying toward the house. "Gotta get the syrup ready." When he had 2 big aluminum kettles filled with syrup warming on the back of the stove, he hustled up to his room for the box of wooden sugar on snow paddles that he had whittled 3 years ago. Each paddle was the size and weight of a spoon and had a flat end which widened out at the tip. The kids would use the paddles to wind up the waxy syrup. He put half of them at one end of the dining room table and half at the other end. When he had moved the chairs back near the walls, he took a final glance around. The table looked wonderful. He wished Tish were here. As he raced for the barn to start milking, a sudden devastating thought struck him. "Snakes and shellfish," he gasped to the blue dusk. "Today is Tish's birthday." In the excitement of sugaring and the party, he had completely forgotten that she was born on St. Patrick's Day, and he hadn't sent her even a card. But he'd get one tonight when he drove up with Dad on the truck to collect the kids for the party, and he'd mail her the cake of sugar with Wendy's head impressed on it. He'd write Tish tomorrow and explain why he'd forgotten. Mom said he had the worst memory in the world. And he had, all right. Disgusted with himself, he tramped into the barn, lit the lanterns, and settled down to milking, dreaming of Easter, when he would see Tish again. Excuse me. Don't want to offend. When the Clark truck rumbled into the yard, loaded with shouting boys and girls, the house was blazing with lights, and Mom stood in the open front door to welcome them. She shook hands with Miss Hunter and Miss Tony and took them up to her room to leave their coats. The boys chucked their things in Toby's room and the girls in Betsy's room, while Johnny jogged from one to the other, wild with excitement. They all tumbled downstairs into the dining room. Toby collected the boys and led them out to the woodshed for the snow pans. With a piece of burlap, he wiped the snow off the bottom of the pans as each boy went through the kitchen door. When they were all on the table, he went to look at his syrup. It was boiling beautifully. Mom had been attending to it while he was gone. He thrust in the syrup thermometer. It had to be 18 or 20 degrees above the boiling point. "Hooray!" he yelled. "The syrup's all ready. Greg, give me a hand with the other kettle." "You bet, Greg." The scientist loped to the stove, his short sandy hair standing up like a brush on his head. "Here's a holder. Don't burn yourself. We'll put them down on the iron trivets on the table and ladle out from there." The children crowded around the table, chattering and giggling and yelling, and the racket was deafening. Toby smiled at his girl guests. "Bring your pans up, everybody. I'll ladle for the girls, and Dick, you attend to the boys, will ya?" The 2 lines formed, Betsy's guests first, and then the older boys and girls. Toby poured dipperfuls of the hot golden syrup on the pans of snow, weaving the streams around so the syrup became chewy. Mom had set up a separate card table for Miss Hunter and Miss Tony, and Dad and Cliff and herself. Betsy carried a pan to Miss Tony. Toby took one to Miss Hunter. Johnny lugged one to Mom and then to Dad and Cliff. "Sail in," said Toby to the kids. "Eat it while it's hot. And help yourselves to more and to everything." Johnny attached himself to Molly Thatcher, the future school teacher. "There's plenty more where that came from," he piped, beaming up at her. "That's grand," said Molly heartily. "I could eat a whole hillful of sugar on snow." The kids sailed with enthusiasm, wound the hardening curls of syrup on their paddles, and smiled blissfully as they ate the amber wax and snow. "Brother, this is good," said Hank, coming to the kettle for seconds. "And those donuts." "Build up your muscle for baseball," Toby grinned. Most of the kids were too busy eating to talk, but when they were stuffed with maple sweetness, they tackled the pickles and yowled. "Ooh, my mumps," cried Deborah, holding her jaw in one hand and a pickle in the other. "Me too," said Larry, making an awful face. "Toby," Mom called, "bring in the cocoa kettle. The green paper cups are in the pantry. Bet you get those." Chilled by her little girlfriend, Betsy hurried out to the pantry. Toby and Bill Garrity went for the cocoa. When everybody was stuffed, Toby and Betsy carried in their souvenirs in 2 big grape baskets. Betsy handed out her star cakes wrapped in green paper and tied with white ribbon, and her friends gathered around her and asked, "How'd you make 'em, Bets, and where did you get the stars?" Betsy smiled and shyly and happily, "Oh, I just made 'em from syrup, but the syrup is from my very own tree." "You got a tree of your own?" Timmy McGowan was impressed. "My father gave it to me," said Betsy proudly. When Toby's friends opened their white packages fastened with the green cellophane ribbon and saw their windy cakes, the place turned into bedlam. "We want Windyfoot! We want Windyfoot!" the boys shouted. Toby laughed, but he bent down and whispered to Bets. She nodded and ran out of the dining room, her pigtails and their green ribbons flopping gaily. There was a sudden hush, and Johnny announced loudly, "Excuse me. I am now going to give my present to my guest." And he trotted over to Cliff and climbed up on his lap and gave him a resounding, sticky kiss on his leathery cheek. "My flapping feathers!" exclaimed Cliff, taken by surprise. His neck turned red. He sat Johnny down on his lap. "Now, what did you want to go and do that for?" "Because I felt like it," answered Johnny, lifting his beatific smile to Cliff's embarrassed blush. "Cliff," Toby asked, "will you please play your harmonica for us so we can play games?" "Well, yep." "Where is it, Pocket?" "In about 10 minutes, Toby said. "Thanks." Cliff said, "Johnny, quit your wiggling. You'll be all tired out before the party's half started." A sudden, long, drawn-out "oh" went through the room. Betsy stood in the kitchen doorway with her calf, Chris. The little tan bull had a green ribbon tied around his neck and a big green bow on each of his straddled forelegs. He gazed with startled dark eyes at the delighted children. "Oh, the darling," said Miss Tony, Betsy's teacher, in a soft voice. Betsy was pale and her eyes looked as big and dark as Chris's. Toby paid attention to Miss Tony for the first time. She was a short, slender, youngish woman with gray at her temples and a beautifully modeled, olive-skinned face. Golly, Toby thought, no wonder the 4th grade kids liked her. She was lovely to look at. Miss Tony had been teaching at the village school only 2 years, so she hadn't had her when he was in 4th. But Miss Hunter was a teacher for him. He knew, and he wasn't just being loyal. Miss Hunter had the best sense of humor in the whole township, and anybody who went through her rigorous 7th grade courses came out able to laugh at himself as well as able to hold his own. And any 8th grade from here to Halifax. He caught Miss Hunter's blue eye at the moment. She smiled wickedly at him. Daydreaming again, Tobias? Yes, Miss Hunter, he grinned back. About you. Oh, my heaven, she said. I am flattered, but maple trees are more educational. All of the kids were crowding around Betsy and Chris, patting the astonished little bull, who leaned close to Betsy's side for protection. Hey, said Cliff, standing up abruptly and dumping Johnny unceremoniously on the floor. I better take that calf out to the barn now. Excuse me, kids, Chris has to go to bed. Betsy handed Chris's green ribbon leash over to Cliff with a smile. I guess he is getting kind of sleepy, she explained to the children. Where's Windyfoot? Asked Helen Hale's mischievous voice. We want Windyfoot, the boys and girls took up a chant. We want Windyfoot. Toby looked at Mom and Dad. May I? For 5 minutes, Mom said, her eyes laughing. Thank goodness Windy's not a baby. Wipe off his hoof, said Dad. If he tracks up the floor, you'll have to clean it. I'll push the chairs back in the living room for the games. Thanks, Dad. Toby bolted for the door. In the stable, he hung the lantern on the nail near the pony's stall and went to the tack room and brought back the special green jockey's cap he'd bought for Wendy the day before yesterday. He'd cut tilted holes in it for Wendy's ears, just as he had in the red cap at Christmas. And as he fitted it on, the Shetland took an affectionate nibble on the shoulder of his open Mackinaw. Hold still, Toby said. You've got to look handsome. Wendy stamped and shook his head and said that he didn't think he wanted to. I don't give a continental what you think, Toby told him. I know what I think, and you are handsome. He backed the pony out of the box stall and surveyed him. Wendy's dappled hide was curried to a fair ewe well. His black mane and tail were brushed and shining. His black hooves were polished, and with the green jockey cap cocked jauntily on the side of his head, he was the dandiest looking pony on this side of Ireland or beyond. Toby patted his nose and led him out of the stable toward the house. In the woodshed, he wiped Wendy's hooves clean of snow with the snow pan burlap and led the quivering pony into the kitchen. When they reached the dining room door, there was a concerted yell. Wendy! The kids cried, Windyfoot! Wendy tossed his head proudly, pawed the dining room carpet, and whooshed at Julie McCain's brown curls. Julie's rain-colored eyes grew violet-colored with enchantment. She put out a trembling hand and barely touched Wendy's neck. Toby realized that Julie, who, next to Larry, could do arithmetic in a flash, was as shy as a fawn, hesitant even with Windyfoot. Julie, he likes you, he said quietly. He never whooshes at people, unless he does. Her pale, frightened face seemed to open into beauty. Oh, Toby, do you think he does? He whooshed. Well, I am whooshing right back at him. She gave him a wavering smile, swallowed, leaned her cheek against Wendy's, and said, so that Toby could scarcely hear her, whoosh, Wendy. Wendy nickered. That settles it, said Toby joyfully. Cliff came through the crowd of children. Okay, Toby, I'll take him back. No, I will, Cliff, said Dad. You go get the music department in order. Shoo the company into the living room, Toby. I've rolled the rug up so the floor is clear for singing games. Come on, Wendy, you old son of the Shetland Isles. Old is spelled O-U-L-D. You old son of the Shetland Isles. In the living room, a birch and apple wood fire was crackling in the fireplace. Mom sat on the davenport between Miss Hunter and Miss Tony. All three of them were going it a blue streak. All three of them were going it a blue streak about the Parent Teachers Association and the school library, and the village library, and the refugee children in Europe, and the Navajo Indians, and the atom bomb, and the way to make a Star of Heaven cover lid, and how to make the Webster County specialty of eggs and potatoes called Tis Pie Taint Pie. Toby had to grin. Wendy tossed his head proudly, pawing the dining room carpet. Anybody who knew everything about those subjects, it was Mom, especially when they all got into the cooking department. She wasn't so slow on bombs or Indians either. Cliff settled down on the bench by the fireplace and gave a few tentative tootles on his mouth organ. Then he burst into "Go in and out the window." "Everybody join hands," he shouted, starting the tune once more, and the game was on. When it came to Toby's turn to be the player in the center of the ring, he had to pick a girl. He didn't know whom to choose. Go in and out the window.
Hello, today's simple song is called Go In and Out the Window. I'm standing because we're going to do some standing actions in this one today. This one can also be turned into a game. It is a circle game, so what would happen in the game is we would all be standing in a circle, we'd be holding on to hands, we'd lift them up in the air and make little arches. Now, there would be one person not in the circle who would be going in and out the arches or in and out the windows, and at the end of the song, they would stop and they would tap whoever they're beside. Now, if you're in between two people, you would pick one of those people, and then you would have two people going in and out the window. Person in the circle, you would start the. You're gonna either sing. I'd like you to do. I challenge you to try singing it by yourself.
Y'all probably just need to Google it yourself. Seems like it wants to take too long to show the game. All right, you know where to find the rest. So, when it came Toby's turn to be the player in the center of the ring, he had to pick a girl. He didn't know whom to choose. The kids sang, "Go forth and face your lover." It's way out of tune. Go forth and face your lover. Go forth and face your lover. For we have gained the day. That's all out of tune. "Oh, bulrushes," he said to himself, and wished that Tish were here, but she wasn't. So he did a frantic counting out rhyme to himself among his 5 7th graders and Betsy's 5 4th graders, mentally pointing to each girl in turn. "Did you ever, in your leaf life loaf, see the devil, dovel, kiss his wife, wove? No, I never, in my leaf life loaf saw the devil, dovel, kiss his wife, wolf." He ended up with Nancy McKellis, Mr. Mike's daughter. This would be fun. He liked Nancy. He could remember more history dates. She could remember more history dates than he could, but he could remember more history than she could. There was a good-natured rivalry between them in history class. He knelt before her while the other kids giggled and sang. I kneel because I love you. I kneel because I love you. I kneel because I love you, for we have gained the day. Nancy's eyes danced when he had to measure his love with his hands moving farther and farther apart. She leaned over and asked impishly, how much is 144 times 144? Oh, go to grass, said Toby, laughing and stretching his arms wide. She knew he couldn't do arithmetic in his head. He had enough trouble doing it on paper. But he knelt there stubbornly, trying to multiply until Cliff called, don't stop in the middle of the game. Toby, get up. Goodbye. I hate to leave you. Dick Norton yelled after Cliff, goodbye. I hate to leave you. The game went on to its finish, and Cliff promptly swung into an Irish jig. The children hopped and danced and shuffled any old which way until they were breathless with laughter. Dad returned from putting Windyfoot to bed and took over the calling out. They played The Lady on the Mountain and the Ali Ali O, and Pop Goes the Weasel. At last they sat down on the floor in front of the fireplace and sang songs. With Ribs and Johnny leaning against his right leg, Cliff played the tunes. He had to have his left foot free for tapping the floor. Ribs tapped the air with his tail, and Johnny kept time with his head against Cliff's right kneecap. Johnny had taken a fancy to one of Betsy's friends, a little girl with long eyelashes over hazel eyes, named Andrea. Or Andrea, I'm not sure. He sat gazing raptly at her from the security of Cliff's leg for some time before he arose, gave Ribs a pat to tell him to stay put, and sauntered debonairly over to sit down beside her. Andrea, 9, 3 years his senior, glanced at him sideways and continued singing in a high, off-key voice, there's a long, long trail a-winding in the land of my dreams. Me too, said Johnny conversationally. What? Asked Andrea politely. Into the land of my dreams too, said Johnny, and just then Poke came and wound herself into his arms. This is our cat. She pokes her whiskers into everything. That's why we call her Poke. I have a cat, said Andrea, only she's a tiger. You know, stripes, gray. Yes, I know, said Johnny, who had never seen a tiger cat in his life, and he'd heard of them, but he hadn't seen them. Toby, who was watching all this, knew that Johnny had heard of the tiger kittens at Dick's house, but he had somehow confused them with jungle tigers. He listened to his little brother with admiration. Striped and kind of ferocious, said Johnny. Grrr! Who? Marceline? Demanded Andrea. She is not. She is the nicest cat in the whole world. She never claws and she never bites and she eats anything. Oh, said Johnny, stroking Poke firmly. She couldn't be the nicest cat in the world because Poke is. But he was obviously overcome by the fluttering eyelashes. Andrea ignored his remark, but Marceline hasn't been home all day and nobody knows what could have happened. My mother won't say and my father won't say, and I hunted and hunted after school, but I couldn't find her. Johnny was quick to respond to a lady in distress. Don't you worry, she's probably hiding in a closet or under a woodpile or something, and when she gets hungry enough, she'll come home. Poke always does, and even when she has a fit of Wanderfoot, maybe she got mad at you and just ran away. Oh, no, said Andrea haughtily. She wouldn't do that. She loves the whole family. Huh? Said Johnny, really giving Andrea a thorough survey and deciding that eyelashes weren't enough. Well, you never know. He got to his feet. Maybe she was catnipped, he said in a rough, diabolical whisper. Maybe she was catnipped. He crossed the room again, curled up with Ribs and Poke beside Cliff's right foot, and went to sleep. He woke with a leap when Cliff started playing for the last game. Wind up the maple tree, or wind up the maple tree. I don't know. Never heard of it before. For this, the boys and girls were separated because the boys were apt to turn the game into a rumpus. Greg, the tallest, was chosen to be the tree. Johnny, as the shortest, was the winder. All of the other boys joined hands. The big ones next to Greg, the little ones following after, with Johnny at the end. They formed a loose spiral around Greg as far away from him as they could get by stretching their arms tightly. "Wind up the maple tree," called Dad, and Cliff began the tune. In time with the marching music, Johnny led the boys around clockwise while Greg stood still. They chanted, "Wind up the maple tree, hold on tight, wind it all day and wind it all night." As they wound closer and closer to Greg, one by one, the boys had to stop, and finally they were wound so tightly together that they couldn't finish the game properly by unwinding. Bill Garrity laughed, and it upset the balance of the whole bunch. They fell over into a tangle. The big boys tried not to tumble on the smaller ones, the fourth graders helpless with glee. "Hey," said Dick, "let's do it right. Let Toby be the tree this time." "And don't wind up like a spool of thread," chirped Johnny, "because I've got to unwind you if somebody doesn't knock me over first." They started again this time. Instead of each boy for himself, they moved all together and wound up around Toby without pushing against each other. "Jump up and down on both feet," Dad called. Now Johnny started unwinding. "Not so fast. Sing, fellows. Stir up the dumplings. The pot boils over." The kids scooted to the left with a gallop to unwind while Johnny pulled the spiral out straight. "Unwind the apple tree," hollered Johnny. "He's my brother." Reinforced again by sandwiches and cocoa, the 7th graders and the 4th graders piled in the Clark truck, calling back that it had been a grand party. Miss Hunter and Miss Tony sat up with Dad. Toby rode him back with the kids. Mom had said that Bets and Johnny would have to call it a day and go to bed. The boys and girls sang all the songs they could think of as they drove back to the village square. The night was cold, and they were snug in the straw of the truck with the blankets, and they grew slowly quiet and drowsy. Toby dangled his legs over the back of the truck and watched the snow clouds rise out of the northeast and gradually overtake the stars. He hoped there would be sugar snow again tonight. The sky looked like it. When he stretched out in his own bed at last, he flung his arms over his head and yawned with contentment. It had been a marvelous party. Then his heart gave a jerk. He leaned on his elbow and looked out of the open window. If only Tish had been there. She was 13 now, and he wouldn't be 13 until July, darn it. But what were 4 months between true friends? Nothing at all. He lay down again. It was sure as maple going to snow tonight, and he could smell it in the wind. Between a yeah and a who, he plunged into sleep. Chapter 7, Jnana.